40 eastbound to Greenford from Hillingdon. Those emergency repair works are still taking place. Very slow on the A10 southbound from Cheshunt to the M25 junction. Delays of about 15 minutes, and that's because of the ongoing works. And on the trains, well, the problems at East Croydon, a train's broken down, so Southern and Thameslink services are disrupted.
This is LBC.
Avi's online.
Worry now. 0345 6060 973 LBC.
Whether you're dreaming of
Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 minutes before 8. Well, I have to share something with you. This LBC exclusive about the number of women who've woken to find that their husbands or partners have indulged in sexual acts. We had that call just there. Well, the response is extraordinary, so this really is a major issue. I'm just rejigging the show as we speak, so if you can't get through now, we are going to return to this in the next hour after 8 o'clock. It is something clearly that needs to be looked at, and we will have a raft of appropriate agencies and people and numbers that can help you, because I'm seeing the emails pour in. My goodness me. This is something I find quite extraordinary, but something we must address. Okay. To other matters. And shall we lift the mood a little bit after that very tough listening at 9 minutes before 8 and say the fact that we have an extra 60 million Pfizer booster jabs on the way. Is this possibly because of a third wave? I don't know. A man who might, though, is Conservative MP and Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi, who joins me now. Is this sort of just double precaution, bolting and padlocking the door, or are you aware of something that might be on its way in autumn? Minister, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. It's future-proofing the programme. So if you recall, we started protecting the most vulnerable, the residents of care homes and those who look after them, the over 80s, the over 75s, the over 70s, and those who are clinically extremely vulnerable. So the top 4 cohorts back in December, 8th of December with Pfizer, and then 4th of January with AstraZeneca. We've got to make sure that if we need to in the autumn, and the clinicians will make that decision, if the durability of that protection wanes, then we have as many options for the scientists, for the clinicians, in terms of vaccine supply. One is Pfizer, the other one is AstraZeneca, including talking to AstraZeneca about their vaccine variant that they're developing, the Novavax vaccine being made in Teesside, and of course the Valneva vaccine in Scotland will be available as well. So we have to be able, my responsibility is to give them that optionality in terms of supply and plan deployment. The NHS team are already planning the deployment and ready to go if we need to in September for a booster jab for those who are most vulnerable. But that decision will be made by the clinicians and the scientists. That Chris Whitty and his fellow chief medical officers in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland will make that decision.
And what informs them, Minister? A couple of times you've referenced what might or might not happen in the autumn. What are the indicators that the professionals you're working with look for? Oh, you are a professional as well, but medical professionals, I hasten to add.
Yeah, I'm not a medical. I'm a chemical engineer,
right.
Sadly, but not a medical professional. But what they will be doing is, so we know vaccines work because we've seen already in real life data from Public Health England now that we've vaccinated almost 34 million people with the first dose, 1 in 4 with 2 doses, that they work to protect you. We also now they cut household transmission by 50%. The bit that they're still obviously looking at is, does the protection wane in terms of antibodies? And Jonathan Van Tam talked about that yesterday in terms of how they do that, in terms of the blood serum and how it works versus different virus variants. And of course, the T-cell protection. That's really something that is the domain of the scientists. And I await, as does the Prime Minister, their decision. What we have to make sure, the responsibility of the Prime Minister, is to make sure they have at their fingertips the vaccines they need and as many options as possible for the autumn from September onwards to make that decision.
You reference Jonathan Van Tam, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, who said that it's incredibly safe for people who've been fully vaccinated to meet this. He goes on, he's highly confident scientifically there's little risk if 2 people who'd received both jabs meet up at least 2 weeks after their second dose and so on. So with all that good news, isn't it time now to urgently review some of the restrictions that are still in place, Minister, not least those people who are gathering to say farewell to a loved one, if in many instances they will be perhaps more of our older cohorts, so because of the success of your programme they will have had their double vaccination? Why can't they meet to say goodbye possibly to some friend they've had for 30, 40, 50 years?
No, you're quite right, and I think many of your listeners have lost loved ones to this terrible pandemic. I've lost my uncle to that, as you know.
I'm sorry, I do.
And we will always look at how we can do better when it comes to making sure that people can say farewell to their loved ones. The important thing to remember is 1 in 4 now have that protection of 2 doses. Jonathan Van Tam was talking about the people who've got the 2-dose protection.
Yes, yeah.
So we just have to be careful. I think that he went on to say last night, and I listened to very carefully, is only a few more weeks. The right thing to do, if you recall, when the Prime Minister set the roadmap to reopening the economy, he talked about 4 tests. 1 is vaccines continue at scale. 2, vaccines continue to be effective. 3 is infection rates need to remain low because the virus will look to infect more people to mutate, to survive. And of course, those variants, the mutations. So it's important to remember that even if the vaccines have 85% efficacy and we vaccinate with 2 doses, 85% of the population. We're not there yet. We are at 25% with 2 doses. That still is 72% of the adult population of the population protected. So there's still a significant number of people for the virus to go after and attempt to survive. That's why we've got to be careful. And the 4 weeks plus 1 between each step, 4 weeks is for data collection, 1 week is for then analysing the data. Now, the good news is that I can share with you is we're not seeing any evidence that would lead us to believe that we can't deliver on the 17th of May further reopening of the economy. And then, of course, we'll look at the data beyond that for the 21st of June.
But do you recognise these figures quoted today from the Office for National Statistics that England is getting close to herd immunity? That you agree with that?
So really, really positive statistics. When I saw those, almost 70% of adults in England have now got antibodies. That's really, I tell you what's amazing, Nick, and it really does fill me with pride, is that the British people just get this, and they are literally, as Nikki Kanani said yesterday, are booking their appointments when they get the invite in their hundreds of thousands, because they understand how important this. The ONS data also shows, I think 93% of adults will take a vaccine or very likely to get their vaccine. They just get this, and they're doing everything right at the moment. Let's keep going. Let's do this together. I'm confident that by end of July we would have offered the vaccine to all adults, 1 dose at least, and then we'll continue going with the 2 doses, and we'll get there together, and we'll get our lives back. And then this virus by next year will be no more than the sort of annual flu vaccination programme.
All right, that fills you with pride. Final question. As a senior member of the party, the Conservatives under investigation by the Electoral Commission, how does that make you feel, Minister?
Well, Conservative Central Office will cooperate with the Electoral Commission. It's right that these things are looked at properly by the Electoral Commission. The Prime Minister's answered umpteen questions about this. There is very important elections in 7 days' time, Nick, and I'm sure you'll be covering them.
Oh, we will.
The Labour Party on this, P.T. Barnum would be proud of Keir Starmer, because he did a big sit-down interview last night with one of your colleagues, Robert Peston. 10 minutes in, not a single offer of a policy for those voters that will be voting next Thursday. We are going out there explaining to them how we're delivering, both in terms of the vaccination programme, economic recovery, Conservative councils delivering much lower council tax.
But it might be deliveries from top-end designers that interest my listeners more. Desks costing £10,000. That's the deliveries they might be interested in if they've not been fully accounted for, Minister.
That's a really important question. Your listeners will be asking themselves the question, who paid for it? Did the taxpayer, did we pay for it, the taxpayers, or did the Prime Minister pay for it? And it's clear that the Prime Minister paid for this. He's made that very clear. He's answered umpteen questions
on this.
One Tony Blair spent $300,000 of taxpayers' money on refurbishing. I wonder if
we can say in 2021. I wonder who initially paid, though. I don't imagine you know, but you're a very smart man. That is the key here, isn't it? He's been asked umpteen times who initially paid, and umpteen times he's chosen not to reveal. That's what a lot of it turns on, isn't it, Minister?
Well, and he's also appointed Lord Geidt, who is a crossbencher, Her Majesty the Queen's former private secretary, a really credible individual who is proactively looking at this, and he will absolutely comply with Lord Geidt's report. If there are other declarations to be made, he will make those declarations. But ultimately, your listeners will be saying, look, did I pay for this? Did my taxes go towards Boris and Carrie's flat? No, they didn't. Boris paid for it.
OK. Would you pay £5,000 for an armchair, Mr Zahawi?
Well, look,
would you pay
getting into what people pay for their armchairs or sofas or wallpaper? I tell you what, I would worry more about is curtains, because I think if Keir Starmer doesn't come up with some credible policy soon, it'll be curtains for Keir.
There we go. They did that one. Nadhim Zahawi, always good speaking with you. Thank you. Vaccines Minister, appearing here on LBC, where the time is 8 o'clock. The news is with Simon Conway.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock. The US president says America is on the move again as it emerges from the coronavirus pandemic. Joe Biden has given a speech to Congress to mark his first 100 days in office. He highlighted how $220 million